It's the most important thing. It's the number one top secret. We cannot move on to any other part of these secrets until we regulate. So I'll give you a little example about myself this time. It was about a time I didn't handle a situation very well, and I was already having a pretty bad day. Everything had gone wrong at home, and this was while he was out at work. And so by the time he comes home from work, I was basically a ticking time bomb. And instead of saying and communicating, "Hey, babes, I had a really rough day and I need some help around the house. Can you help me, please?" I snapped. It was when he took off his shoes and he left them in the hallway again, and he knows that that frustrates me. And every little thing that he'd ever done, the way he breathed, the way he smelled, it just all annoyed me and it came rushing out of me. And surprise, it did not go well. He got defensive and I got more upset. And by the end of it, we were both so angry we weren't speaking to each other. And I remember cooking dinner that night and just banging pots and pans around. But does that sound familiar? Because the thing is, I was so caught up in my emotions that I didn't stop to think about how I was showing up in that moment. And here's what I learned from that moment and what I'll share with you now, which is regulating your emotions before you communicate can literally change everything. It's not about being perfect. It's about pausing, grounding yourself, and showing up in a way that builds connection instead of conflict. But let's dive into how you can do that with all of this, okay? So, when you are emotionally overwhelmed, your brain is not in problem-solving mode. It just isn't going to work that way. It's in survival mode. So let me explain how this works. Have you ever heard of the amygdala? So we all have amygdalas in our brain. Technically, we have two, one in each hemisphere. And it's a part of your brain responsible for processing emotions like fear and anger. So when you're triggered, the amygdala is taking over. And your prefrontal cortex, that part of your brain responsible for rational thinking and decision making, it basically is shutting down at this point in time. And that's why, in the heat of the moment, it's so easy to do or say something you regret, like me completely snapping at my husband, when your brain is literally wired to react instead of respond. So, how many of you ever thought, why did I just say that after an argument? I want you to type me in the chat if you've ever been there. Show these other women that you're not alone. Yeah, Lynette, me too many times. Yeah, me all the time, honestly, girl. Seriously. Anita says me. Yeah, yeah. I think I saw Kim's face nodding too, and I said that with a little bit of a grin. Mm-hmm. Yeah, me with the extra, says Kiki. That, my friends, is your amygdala in action. But the good news is we can train ourselves to interrupt this process. So when you regulate your emotions, you're calming your amygdala and you're reactivating that prefrontal cortex. This allows you to think clearly and communicate effectively. So let's talk about one of my clients. I'm going to call her Rachel for this one, so I don't want to give out her name. But Rachel came to me because every time she tried to have a meaningful conversation with her partner, it would escalate into an argument each time. And she told me, "I just don't know how to keep my emotions in check. It feels like I'm spiraling even before I say a word." Now, see, her brain was in survival mode, not connection mode. But once she learned how to regulate her emotions, everything just started to shift. She could pause, ground herself, and approach the conversation from a place of calm. So, how do you regulate your emotions, though, in the heat of the moment? This is why I want to introduce you to the RAISE method. It's my favorite thing that I use myself personally. So, I developed this while figuring out how to calm my own self down. There's a lot of methods out there to ground yourself. Feel free to use any method that feels right to you. But I'm going to teach you about the RAISE method because I really love the framework that it brings. So it's a simple, science-backed process designed to help you calm your brain and approach conversations with clarity. So first, we have remove yourself. This is key. When you're feeling overwhelmed, it's okay to take a step back. Remove yourself from the situation, even just for a few minutes, and this can help stop the emotional spiral. So with Rachel, we started practicing this by saying something like, I need 5 minutes, and then she would step away to reset. So how many of you have ever tried to power through a tough conversation and wished you had just stepped away for a moment? Type yes in the chat if that's been you. Have you ever just felt like, no, I gotta get this conversation in, and then it blew up? Yeah. Kim says yes. Linda says yes. And yeah, Lynette says, yes, my stubborn self. Yes, exactly. No, but let me just push through. I can get it this time. No, we need to be able to remove ourselves. Go to the bathroom for just a hot minute if that's what you need. It's anything it is that you need in order to do that. Because the next step, once you've removed yourself here, is I want you to anchor yourself. So for this one, we want to use any sort of grounding techniques that work for you. This can look like deep breathing, maybe focusing on the physical sensations in your body. All of these can help calm your nervous system down. So for Rachel, this is what worked for her: sitting on her bed, breathing in for 4 breaths and breathing out for 4 more breaths. And for her, she was focusing on her fingers, seemed to be her grounding of choice. And she told me just focusing on my breath gave me the clarity to come back to the conversation with a clear head. So now I want us to all try this together because I want you to see what it feels like. So go ahead and get yourself in a place if you can to breathe. And we're going to breathe in through our nose and out through our mouth. And we're going to breathe in for 4 and then out for 4. Okay, so we're going to go in, 4, out, 3. Let's do it one more time in through our nose. 1, 2, 3, 4, and out through our mouth. 2, 3, 4. Beautiful. Do you feel different right now? Do you feel a little bit calmer? Whenever I do this, my voice always drops. I get very excitable while I'm doing these, and I get excited to see everyone, and then I breathe, and then I'm like, oh, I feel good. That's the feeling I want you to get into when you're in that triggered state. Once we are anchored, then we're going to be able to identify the emotions that we're feeling. So we want to identify and name our emotions in order to help take control of them. So when Rachel started saying, I feel hurt, instead of just reacting with anger to her partner, it shifted the dynamic of the conversation completely. So let's get those chat boxes opened again. And I want you all to think of one word that describes how you feel when you are in the middle of an argument with someone that's close to you, whether it be your husband, your boyfriend, your partner, your best friend, your mother, your daughter, your sister, it doesn't matter. But when you are triggered, when you are in the middle of an argument with that person, how do you feel? What's that one word? Frustrated. Oh, beautiful word, Kim. I love that. Yeah. What are some other words? We can feel overwhelmed. We could feel angry. We could feel, oh, these are good. Look at you with your feelings now, Lynette. So proud of you. Furious, sad, upset, hurt, overwhelmed, frustrated, unheard. Do you hear these? They're so powerful. And being able to identify, I feel blamed, I feel attacked, I feel defensive. I love that, Julie. Yeah, because they're all so real. And being able to really identify how you feel, and if you can, get even more clear on where you feel it somatically in your body, that starts to open up the door for communicating that later. And so once we have removed ourselves and we've anchored ourselves and we've identified how we feel, now we need to look at our stories. The stories are the narratives that we're telling ourselves in those tough moments. Doesn't necessarily make them true. But here's the thing, our brains are meaning making machines. So when something happens, like your partner forgetting to pick something up that you asked for from the store, your brain immediately fills in the gaps with a story. So for Rachel, she used to assume that her partner didn't care about her feelings. If he didn't respond to her text right away, her brain would think he's ignoring me. He doesn't love me enough. There's something I did wrong. And so all of these stories would start piling up in her head. But when we started working on this step, I asked her, what if that's just a story your brain is telling you? What else could be true? Ask yourself that question. What else could be true? Does he not care about you? Was he not listening to you? Does he not respect you because he forgot to pick up the bread from the store? What else could be true? Maybe he's really overwhelmed. Maybe he's really busy. Maybe something else is going on. Maybe he actually genuinely didn't listen, like didn't hear you. And this question is a game changer, especially for Rachel. She realized that her partner wasn't ignoring her. He was just overwhelmed with his own stress at work. So, by challenging her initial story, she was able to replace it with a more balanced perspective. She started thinking, hey, maybe he's just having a tough day, you know? And so this shift didn't just change how Rachel approached conversations, it actually completely altered the way she felt in those moments. And instead of spiraling into frustration or self doubt, she started to feel calmer and more open to understanding her partner's perspective. And the truth is, the stories we tell ourselves, they can either help us or they can hurt us. And when we choose to challenge those stories, we create space for connection instead of conflict. And the last one in the raise method is to equilibrate, which is basically just a fancy word for saying balance your thoughts with compassion and logic. So, with everything that we have going on, so we've removed ourselves, we've anchored ourselves, we've identified our feelings, we're challenging our stories, and now we're going to equilibrate. Because when we're in a heightened emotional state, it's easy for our brains to jump to conclusions or worst case scenarios. This is because of something called cognitive distortions. They're just automatic negative thought patterns that feel real in the moment, but are often exaggerated or untrue. So Rachel struggled with this so much. Her go-to thought in arguments was, he doesn't care about me. It's just all the time like, oh, he must not care about me. But when we started working on equilibrating her stories, she realized that the belief was rooted in fear, not fact. And by challenging it, she was able to reframe that thought into something more balanced, something more like, hey, maybe he just doesn't know how to respond right now. And here's why this works. So, when you replace extreme or negative thoughts with balanced ones, you activate that prefrontal cortex, the rational part of your brain, and you dial down the emotional reactivity from your amygdala. And this shift helps you approach conversations with empathy instead of frustration. So, for Rachel, this reframing didn't just change how she felt, it completely transformed her conversations. And when she thought, he doesn't care, her tone would become sharp and angry, and her partner would feel shut down. You can hear it, like, you just don't care about me. But when she started reframing it as maybe he's overwhelmed, she approached him with curiosity instead of blame. And you know what happened? Her partner started opening up more because he didn't feel as attacked. And just to get a little bit more geeky with all of you, because I can't help myself, if you get to know me, you know I like science a lot. This process is rooted in neuroscience and it's called cognitive reappraisal. So, this is the act of reinterpreting a situation to change its emotional impact in the body. And research shows that cognitive reappraisal not only reduces stress, but also strengthens emotional resilience over time. And that emotional resilience is how we build on our relationships over time. So, by using the RAISE method, which again is regulate, anchor, identify, stories, and equilibrate, you now have a framework to raise yourself up out of the spiral of frustration, confusion, and emotional overwhelm. This method empowers you to approach conversations with clarity, compassion, and confidence. But now I want to move on to the second secret, which is learning how to validate your partner's perspective to create trust and connection. So now that we've regulated our emotions, right? We've all got that. We've healed. It's great. We're ready for our next step. And we cannot validate. This is why this is so important. We cannot validate until we regulate. So we really want to make sure that we're regulating first. Hold on, let me make myself tinier. How about this way? Validation is one of the most powerful tools in communication because it builds trust, it reduces defensiveness, and it creates emotional safety. If you're following along in the companion guide, I believe it's on page 9 where we're going to start talking about this. And when we validate, we show someone that their feelings matter, even if we see things differently. So I want to clarify on what validation is not, because I hear this a lot from people. So, first and foremost, validation is not about agreeing with what someone says. Okay? You don't have to say you're right to validate someone else's feelings. Validation is also not about jumping straight to fixing the problem. That can actually often make someone else feel very dismissed and unheard. And finally, validation is not about letting go of your own needs. It's about building a bridge of understanding between your perspective and theirs. So, if you remember Emily from earlier, she was feeling completely stuck in her relationship, caught up in those same frustrating cycles where every conversation just seemed to blow up in her face every single time, no matter how hard she was trying. But after we worked on regulating her emotions, she started learning how to see her partner's side before speaking up. And this right here is where the power of validation comes in. So let's look at this image of two people standing on opposite sides of the figure. Has anyone seen this? Has anyone seen this before? I'd love to know. You can. Okay, I love it when someone hasn't seen this before. This is so great. I know Lynette, you've seen it before, but like this is this is one of my favorite things that I've learned about, where one person sees a 6 and the other person sees a 9. But they're both looking at the same thing, aren't they? Their unique perspective leads them to see completely different numbers. But it's the same thing. And here's the key. They're both right. Like, how can that even happen? Like, that's you can't both be right. But they are, aren't they? One sees a 6 and the other sees a 9. And Emily started to apply this concept in her own relationship. So, for example, she was asking her partner for help around the house, and, he immediately shut down. And instead of getting frustrated, she was like, "Oh, wow, I can see how tired you are from work. Let's chat about this later when you're ready." And that one shift, ooh, it was powerful. But seeing his perspective, his tiredness, his overwhelm before reacting completely changed the tone of their interaction. She was able to see his 6, even though she was looking at her own 9. And the result? He didn't feel criticized. And she felt heard because he was more willing to listen and to engage. And that's the power of validation. It's about building bridges of understanding by seeing things from the other person's side, even if you don't fully agree. And now that we've talked about the power of validation and how it can transform your conversations, let's break it down into what validation actually looks like in action, though. Like, how do you do this? And so validation is about acknowledging the other person's feelings, even if they don't fully understand, like even if you don't fully understand them or agree with them, you can say, "I see you. I hear you, and your emotions are valid." And that's why I wanted to give you a couple simple, effective phrases that you can use to validate your partner's perspective. You can say, "I hear you." You can say, "That makes sense. I like that one. That makes sense." I say that a lot to my husband, even though it makes no sense to my brain at all. That makes sense. Why don't we do it this way first and then do it this way? That makes sense. No, it doesn't, but I can see why it does for him. I can see why you'd feel that way. Or you can say, "You know what? Thanks for sharing that with me." If they say something to you like, "Hey, you really hurt my feelings," or something went down, or "I'm really frustrated right now," like, "You know what? Thank you for sharing that with me." It didn't I didn't say, "Yes, you're right." I didn't say, "Yes, I hurt you." You're just saying, "Thank you." And those are really powerful statements. So if your partner says, "It's like nothing I do is ever good enough for you," instead of jumping in with, "That's not true. I never said that." Or, "That can't, look at all this stuff I do for you all the time. You're being overdramatic." Oof. See how we're starting to butt heads with each other now? Instead, maybe we could try and respond with something like, wow, you know what? Thank you for sharing that with me. That must have been really scary to share how you're feeling right now. And that does sound incredibly exhausting. I'm sorry you're feeling that way. How can we work on this together? Those small shifts in language create emotional safety and build trust. So when someone feels heard and validated, they're more likely to open up and work with you rather than against you. Validation isn't about giving up your own perspective, it's about creating space for both perspectives to exist together. And so now that you know how to validate effectively, we're going to move on to the final secret, which is transforming communication altogether. We want to learn how to collaborate and work as a team to solve problems together. So let's take a quick check in. How's everyone doing? Let me know in the chat how you're doing. Is this making sense? Maybe you could put like a thumbs up or thumbs down in the comments or in your video. You following along okay? I always like to check in. Perfect. Thanks, Lynette. Oh, and Lynette says, I still have trouble getting defensive. Oh, yeah. I mean, same girl. That's what it's all about. That's why the very first step is the regulation. I need it for myself all the time. Perfect. Thank you, iPhone. iPhone, I'd love to know who you are as well. Um, just drop your name in the chats just so I know to say thank you later on for coming. Julie says makes sense. Yeah. Okay, perfect. And remember, if you have any questions or something's sitting, differently with you or because this is what I was always like in courses and workshops, like that makes sense, but not quite here. Yes, ask me those nuanced questions. Resist, push back. That's my favorite thing. That's what I love doing as a coach. But I am seeing that you're all following along. Most of the issues I have are not my own defenses, but theirs. Yeah, that's beautiful. And we can work on that because as we're talking, allowing that safety and freedom for that other person to react as they need could potentially help open them up. And so I love that so much. Oh, hi, Diana. Perfect. Thank you so much. All right, so let's get into collaborating because now that we have learned how to regulate our emotions before communicating and how to validate our partner's perspective without losing our own perspective, remember that's important. We're not losing our perspective. The final step is in learning how to collaborate, to work together towards a solution instead of against a problem. So here's where many of us get tripped up. After validating, it's easy to fall right back into the trap of focusing on what went wrong. So, for example, with Emily, when she first started working on these steps, she got the regulation, the validation steps down pretty quickly. But then she found herself jumping straight into problem solving mode without creating space for collaborations and solutions. And so she would say things like, okay, so what are we going to do about it now? She's like, okay, fine, I've regulated, I've done this, I feel hurt, blah, blah, blah. Great, so now what are we going to do about it? Or why haven't you fixed this yet? She just jumped straight into that. And her partner would feel rushed or like he was being told what to do. And so he would start retreating again instead of engaging. So even though Emily was calm and her intentions were good, the way she approached these moments, they weren't inviting her partner to work with her. It was still putting him on the defense. Now, does this sound familiar? This might be the place where some of us are in our conversations and our communication as well, where they're constantly shutting down, they're constantly on the defense. And sometimes, even when we're regulated, even when we validate, we forget that the goal isn't to then fix the problem. It's to build a solution together. And collaborating means stepping into a partnership mindset instead of rushing to control the outcome. So let's take a closer look at how you could shift from a problem-focused conversation to a more solution-based collaboration and what a true partnership looks like in action. So, what does it actually look like to shift from focusing on problems to focusing on solutions? Well, let's break it down. When we are stuck in a problem-focused mindset, our brains default to fight or flight response. This happens because the amygdala, my little friend from earlier, the part of our brain that processes all of our emotions, our fears, our threats, our angers, it takes over again. In conversations that feel critical or accusatory, like pointing out what hasn't been done or pointing out what they're doing wrong, can actually trigger this response, leading to defensiveness or shutdown. And so in these moments, your partner isn't intentionally trying to ignore you. They're not trying to bash you or yell at you. Their brain is simply reacting to what feels like a threat. But when we shift to a solution focused communication, we engage the prefrontal cortex again, the part of the brain, remember, responsible for creativity, empathy, problem solving. And this shift allows both of you to stay calm, connected, and open to collaboration. So, for example, Emily had this exact experience when talking with her boyfriend about chores. And instead of saying, "It's like you never listen to me when I ask you to clean up your dishes," she reframed it in a solution focused tone. And so she said, "Hey, I've noticed I feel more relaxed when the dishes are cleaned before we go to bed. Could we make a quick plan to tackle this together?" This reframing kept the focus on teamwork rather than blaming him. And her partner felt more motivated to help because he now thought he was helping her, not that he was falling short somewhere in his life. And there's even a biological reason why this works. Collaborative conversations release oxytocin. This is the bonding hormone, which strengthens trust and emotional safety. So, by shifting to solution focused language, you're not just changing the tone of just that one conversation, you're literally rewiring your entire relationship dynamic. You're living more on oxytocin with your partner instead of those big dopamine hits. And that's where we want to be in our relationships, that oxytocin bonding hormone. And so here's another example I was thinking of as a different client of mine had a husband who sometimes forgot to text her when he'd be late from work. So before learning to collaborate, she used to be like so angry at him when he would come home, and she would become passive aggressive and say things like, must be nice to get to do whatever you want. And then just kind of leave it at that. But, and I get it. I'm a very passive aggressive person. At least I used to be. But after we worked together, I could really start to see that this was coming from her beliefs that she was holding inside of her that were holding her back. And so instead, she learned to shift to a collaborative tone with, "Hey, I really feel relief when you let me know if you're running behind. It helps me plan the rest of the evening for the family. This is really important to me. Can you help me with this?" See, she regulated and she was able to validate and she was able to get to a good headspace in order to be able to figure this out and word this to him. And this approach now made her partner feel appreciated. It made him feel like he's helping her, helping out the family, not criticized. And yeah, he did often forget to text. It's mind, that's some word there, like went out of my own head, what it's called. But this encouragement allowed him to naturally communicate more often because it was coming from a place of peace and understanding and comfort. And this kind of communication makes it so much more likely that you will be heard and that the other person will actually want to engage with you. And that's really what this is all about. Creating a space where both people feel understood and valued. It is not about winning an argument or proving who's right or wrong. It's about building a stronger connection through collaboration and mutual respect. And so now that we've learned the three simple secrets to get him to hear you without starting a fight, let's just go over them real quick to make sure that they're fresh in your mind. Because these are really the building blocks of better communication. So, first, remember we covered how to regulate. So important to regulate. We talked about how emotions can hijack our brains, making it impossible to think clearly and communicate effectively. It is not your fault when you blow up at someone, it is just shutting down. But we discovered that by calming our amygdala and activating our prefrontal cortex through the raise method, we can actually approach conversations with clarity and control. And this step sets the foundation for quite literally everything else. And next, we talked about how to validate the other person. This is where you acknowledge the other person's feelings and perspectives without losing your own. And we learned how to validate and how this creates emotional safety and trust in the relationship, shifting the tone of the conversation. And finally, we learned how to collaborate. And this one is so important. This is where we learned how you and your partner work together to find the solutions instead of getting stuck in problems. By focusing on teamwork and inviting your partner into the conversation, you are creating a space for mutual respect and connection.